Part 20. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 192. Chapter 192 again. When time comes in mid-March, I have been able to feel the footsteps of spring faintly. For the long-term northern border in winter, this year's spring seems a bit early. Perhaps the kindness of the kindness couldn't bear to see the famine and continued to rage, intending to make spring pork early. But even if the crops are planted now, it will not wait until autumn to harvest food. Therefore, the famine is destined to take more lives of the North China people. It is also destined to cause greater turmoil. Chaos is astairs. Colin read the letter in his hand and looked a little fun. Is this the sentence? Seeing Corlin stopped on the side, he asked curiously. The two of them were enjoying breakfast at this time, but the housekeeper Iman suddenly handed a letter just received. The letter comes from Taihu City. Obviously, this is from the hands of Marquis of Don. Yes, this sentence, Colin sneered, rubbed the letter into a ball, and threw it into the fireplace. The flame jumped and returned to peace. Marquis of Judausen wants to win you. Villa drank milk in a small mouth, but was stirred up by this letter. It should be. Colin looked at Vera, who had a pale face, reached out to hold the opponent's slightly cold hand and comforted, rest assured, this shameless dwarf who betrayed your father, I will definitely cut off my own hands his head. Vera nodded, holding Colin's big hand backhand, a little peace of mind. Colin continued to bury his head to deal with the food in the plate, but he thought in his heart. Perhaps, as the winter is about to retreat, the turmoil in the north will gradually kick off. After using breakfast, Colin was preparing to take Vera to go to the garden, but saw that the butler Iman came over again. Master, the messenger of the north front line is here again. The front line of the north. Colin froze for a moment, and then understood who Iman said. Isn't this a big brother in the future? Take him to my study. Yes, master. Later, Colin turned to Villa and bluntly said, your brother is here, do you want to see it? Charles, Vera was shocked, but then, his face wrinkled, as if he was tangled. If you don't want to see it, you may not see it. I am afraid this time I sneak back. Okay, then go busy, I go to the garden myself. Well, I will come to you later. Nympho. Haha, Charles, welcome to Bingian City again. Dear Angelivores, thank you for your hospitality. Seeing Charles again, his attitude towards Colin was still as respectful as last time. As if I really forgot that I was the first heir of the Duke of the North. Colin invited Charles to sit with a smile and let the maids come to coffee and pastries. However, Charles seemed a little anxious. As soon as he took a sip of coffee, he asked, Angeline, how did you think about last time? Colin's heart was stunned, knowing that Charles was obviously still a proposal to the previous sneak attack on the city of the dead devil. Charles, without the order of the Duke, I dare not send troops to attack the giant demon empire without authorization. Angle Viscount, you are not sold out without authorization, but you are forced to fight back. What's the meaning? When I came back from the front line this time, the giant empire had dispatched 100,000 troops south. It is estimated that it would be able to reach Bingian City after more than a month. Colin's heart moved. Oh, the troll really sent troops. Charles vowed to say, thousands of truths, Angle voice-in-law, this time the troll sent 100,000 troops to go south. It can be said that it completely took the time to the bottom of the family. Elite cavalry can easily attack the Tiantuking city, and make the world's incompetence. Seeing that Colin was still hesitating, Charles persuaded again, Angle Viscount, I know you have received the assistance of the semi-elf kingdom, and the EuropeanGods will help you guard the Bingian city. The rear is unstable. Since this is the case, why not bet with me? Colin rolled his eyes in his heart. Of course, you are willing to bet in secret. Anyway, you do need to go out. Charles, although your strategy really makes me hard, I still have to ask Master Duke. That's too late, Charles was a little anxious. Angle Viscount, before I set off, the troll army had dispatched if you asked for the winter city of Winter. I am afraid that the giant is approaching the Bengian city at that time. How can you divide the troops to attack the Tiantu city? Didn't the Golden Lion Corps have 3 fortresses at the front line? Can't you delay the trips? The castle that Colin said was actually the adult ceremony of Villa at the beginning. The Tiantu King city is surrounded by the snow mountains and mountains. There are only 3 main channels that can be used by the army, and the 3 military castles are just set up in the key position of these 3 channels. Angle Viscount, do you know how many garrisons have the Golden Lion Legion in these 3 flags? Charles had a strong helpless color on his face. How many? 3,000. 3,000 of flags in total. Yes, and most of them are recruits. Colin was speechless for a while. Such an important military place, the Golden Lion Legion was stationed in such a little person. How could this block the giant devils? No. Colin suddenly realized that the 3 flags were likely to be deliberately abandoned by the Duke of St. Hilda. On the one hand, the Golden Lions need to concentrate their strength to deal with the internal rebellion. In this way. Sorry, Charles, I won't send troops without the order of the Duke. Colin's attitude suddenly became extremely tough. Charles looked at Colin's firm look, and finally shook his head and sighed after a while. Colin, did you guess what? Colin also laughed. Charles, have you ever seen the Duke? This time Charles did not deny, nodding, yes, since this point, I will not hide you any more. The sneak attack plan is actually formulated by my father. Sure enough. Colin sneered, and the Duke of St. Hilda wanted to use him. But in the current situation, if you still want to rely on Charles' a few words of institutional words and those nihilistic achievements, you want him to send troops, it is too naive. Of course, Colin understands that he must send troops, not only because of the order of the Duke of St. Hilda, but because once the Trhze is approaching the north, Bengian city is really likely to become the first target. However, the Duke of St. Hilda didn't think about nothing, so Colin played for him. Charles, since it is the Duke's order, of course, I will not obey. However, the messenger of my sent to Winter City has waited for more than 2 months. Angle, of course, his father knew that you wanted to marry Vera. He was actually recognized for this marriage. Therefore, as long as you are willing to send troops to attack the Tiantu King city, he will definitely meet your messenger. Oh, the Duke really said that? Of course, I vowed to you in the name of the St. Hilda family's sacred ancestors, as long as you can lead the army to break through the giant devil city, Vera will definitely marry the Angle family. Colin stared at Charles's eyes, and after a while, he seemed to have finally made up his mind and nodded. Okay, 3 days later, I will send troops to attack the Tiantu King city. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 193. Chapter 193. Under the dim candlelight, there were 3 people sitting next to the long table of the Red Fort restaurant. Colin, Vera, and future big brother Charles. After many considerations, Vera still met her brother. Although she was now suspicious of her adoptive father, she was still a little emotional for this brother. However, after learning about the plan of Colin and Charles, Vera had lost his mind with his brother, and he began to worry about the safety of Colin. Because Charles's identity still needs to be confidential, there is no other servant in the restaurant, and the housekeeper personally serves him. After using the meal quietly, Yaiman brought 3 more desserts. But Vera obviously did not have the mood of enjoying the dessert. She looked up at Colin and asked, Colin, are you really unwilling to take me together? I am a mage, I can help you on the battlefield. Colin held Vera's little hand and laughed, no, we rely on the raid this time, that there are no hard battles to fight. Moreover, I need you to help me keep the city of Bengian in case of north. The realm is chaotic, there must be a person who trusts and I am enough to sit in the town. Charles also smiled and persuaded, Vera, you still stay in Benjian City with peace of mind. Originally, if you secretly ran the Red Castle, it would be inappropriate. Will blame the Viscount Angeli. Facing Charles's ridicule, Vera barely pulled out a polite smile. The eldest son of the Duke is obviously unclear what Villa has experienced in Union City, thinking that the adoptive father and daughter are still as close as before. Colin didn't poke, and looked at everything in front of him with a smile. In his heart, when to tell Charles, his biological father sold him directly in order to create an opportunity to annihilate the Big DV army for the Black Army. If Charles knows his suffering, he actually comes from his father, that scene, hey, it must be very interesting. I won't get a big filial son again. Just when Colin counted how to dig a pit for the Duke's father and son, Vera's crisp voice sounded again, by the way, the Colin, isn't the giant demon empire still have princes of the Sage City? Don't worry, my good sister. Charles smiled and comforted. At the beginning, he played with his father. The Prince of the Holy Samurai was severely injured and had long returned to the north to recuperate. In his current state, if you dare to appear in the city of the giant devil, then our achievements may be extremely bright again. Colin suddenly moved and asked, I heard that the sanctuary is difficult to hurt, but once it is injured, it will be extremely troublesome. That's right, the body of the sanctuary is very different from ordinary people and has a trace of divine characteristics, but because of this, if their bodies are harmed, they need to repair this trace of divineness. However, it is difficult to condense the divinity in all the world. Therefore, once the sanctuary strong is injured, it is difficult to restore it without 2 or 3 years. Colin nodded and asked inadvertently, what about the Duke of St. Hilda? His injury is also serious. Father's injury is really a bit tricky. Charles sighed, and then comforted and comforted again. However, you don't have to worry too much. The church has sent a handicapped bishop to come to Winter City and personally give his father to his father himself. He'll wound. Hearing this, Colin suddenly remembered the Bishop Rongziu, who was about to work in the Winter City, and the Bishop Jin, who was said to have died of illness. That's good. Colin laughed, as if he finally let go. Nympho. In the early morning of 3 days, the sound of low horn sounded in the outskirts of Benjian City. A team of cavalry urged the mount and set foot on the journey to the north. In the biography of the officer. In this raid, Khalil mobilized a total of more than 11,000 people with a total of more than 11,000 people. Among them, there were more than 6,000 Black Army, more than 3,000 cavalry of the Union Guard, and the 2,000 recruits trained in Benjian City in the past year. The combat effectiveness of the Black Army veterans is naturally beyond doubt, but the combat effectiveness of the cavalry team of the Union Guard and the Benjian City recruits is a bit worrying. But Colin still brought them. After all, if you do not experience the test of blood and fire, these recruits will never become a true elite. As for the cavalry forces of the Union Guard, Colin hopes that they can integrate into the Black Club system. This time, with the opportunity to assault on the city of the Giant Devil, let these semi-cavalry experience the combat style of the Black Army. In the head of Benjian City, Colin once again told the housekeeper Yimen and Charles. He followed the army this time, and the military and political affairs in the territory would be responsible for Sherm and Iman. One of the two is the old housekeeper of the Angle family, and the other is the blood of Colin. Naturally, loyalty has to be worried. And the abilities are quite outstanding. With them guarding the back, Colin is very relieved. In the end, Colin said goodbye to Vera. Although the girl is reluctant, in order to prevent Collins from worrying, she still shows a brilliant smile, like a plum blossom in the winter season. Wait for you to return, I will marry you. Colin looked at the girl's smile in front of him, and his chest suddenly rose, and he laughed. Good. The dialogue between the two did not deliberately converge, and the people around them listened to their ears. The family members of the Angra family naturally showed their ant-like smiles and were happy for their lords. Vera's identity is noble enough, of course, it is worthy of Colin. Moreover, this is the blood of the Paladin family. If you really marry Colin, then the Angle family has since been a high nobility of the Glory Empire that can say the name Viscount. It will definitely not be the end of the Angle family. If there is another Paladin in the descendants, the political territory of the entire glorious empire will change drastic changes. Of course, the probability of this kind of thing is very small. The birth of the Paladin is very difficult. From the historical record of the glorious empire, almost all the Paladin strongmen are the descendants of the birth of the palace of the Paladin family. Therefore, now the 5 Paladin families of the empire like to marry each other. Of course, only one of the parents is the blood of the Paladin, and it may not be able to give birth to the descendants of the Paladin. However, in the few examples, the father is a member of the Paladin family. Only the mother was a member of the Paladin family, and the descendants of the Paladin were born, and they never appeared. Maybe the Angle family can break this record, and maybe. Only Charles had a silent expression. I really wanted to remind my sister, pay attention to reserved. Set off. Colin ordered. The tens of thousands of cavalry troops suddenly surged, and they passed towards the Iceland in the north. The sound of horseshoe was like a rolling thunder, shaking the earthy wilderness, and the flags fluttered in the air, guiding the march direction of various cavalry. Vera stood above the head of the city, looking at the dense brigade cavalry to north. In addition to worrying about Colin's safety, she was also full of pride and pride. How can those giants and rats be opponents in such a strong army? This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 194. Chapter 194 Windroar Castle, Part 1. At the end of March, the situation was not optimistic. As the weather gradually warmed, the ambitionists seemed to start to move. All the lords in the north were all smelled the upcoming breath of war. Although at the coming time of this spring, the lords should have been actively preparing for spring plowing so that the current and more intense famine will not continue to spread. But unfortunately, the fragile situation in the northern border today makes the lords not care about spring plowing. Besides, those slaves and civilians starved to death when they starved to death. Of course, the aristocratic people were more concerned about their own territory. Finally, on the first day of April, Mr. Sun, who claimed to be the descendant of the Saint Simon family, officially disclosed his identity in Taihu City. At the same time, it was declared that it was precisely because of the faint incompetence of the Duke of St. Hilda that the unprecedented Great Famine in the north. Therefore, as the descendants of the Paladin family, he spoke for countless people who were tortured by many famine, asking the Duke of St. Hilda to take the initiative to abandon the title of the Lord of the North, so that those who are more capable to bear the Guardian of the North responsibilities. After Mr. Tan's public speech, a northern aristocratic, led by Marquis of Jausen and Earl Uman, also publicly declared that the Duke of St. Hilda was responsible for the famine in the north. A stone aroused thousands of waves, and the St. Simon family was silent for 300 years. This time, the sudden strong return, completely stirred up the wind in the north. The major lords in the north also began to consider how to stand in the team. As for the northern people's people, the northern people would certainly not care about the Saint Sima family for thousands of years of fame for thousands of years. In fact, many people have long forgotten this former pavilion family. However, the famine that has been raging for half a year has accumulated a lot of dissatisfaction with the St. Hilda family in the hearts of the North China. Now it is ignited by the San Simon family to ignite these dissatisfaction, and instantly. Countless northern people who can't eat enough food have begun to feel that perhaps, the north should also change a master. Faced with the public opinion offensive of the San Simon family, Duke St. Hilda finally appeared in public. This is also the first time he has made a public appearance since he duels with the Holy Warrior. The Lord of the Northern Border counterattacked without politely, refuting the ridiculous remarks of the San Simon family, claiming that they were the culprits of the Northern Rebellion. At the same time, he announced that a lot of lords such as Marquis and Earlumon were rebelled in the north, and decided to immediately deprive them of their title and land, and sent the Golden Lion Legion to the Iron Furnace City. Rebellion forces. In addition, the Duke of St. Hilda also issued an emergency call order, asking all lords and major mercenaries in the north to join this rebellion war. For a while, the wind was surging in the north, and the dispute between the lion and the tiger officially kicked off. When it was chaotic in the north, Colin had led his army to the snow mountains. The cold wind roar here, and the snow is full of snow, there is no at all in spring. Going forward, even if it officially entered the territory of the giant demon empire, Colin and others could no longer hide their whereabouts. Of course, in order to enter the giant demon empire, you still need to cross the last barrier. Master Engel, Charles of face-covered San Hilda family knight was taken to a temporary command post and bowed towards Colin and Charles. He is wearing a full set of locks, a badge printed on his chest, with a knight sword and a kite shield on his waist, a cone helmet with his left hand, and the various knife marks and blood on the equipment are showing that he has recently showed 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 that he has recently been just experienced a bloody battle. Blood Cavaliers, what is the situation in the wind roar? Charles asked anxiously. The wind roar in his mouth was one of the three arms of the Golden Legion to the Golden Legion, and it was also the fortress where Charles had served before. Crossing this fortress, can Colin really enter the territory of the giant demon empire? The Brad Knight is the commander of the guards of Fengying Bao. The DV Destover army arrived at Fengla Castle 13 days ago and launched an attack on us. The number of opponents was large. Our army finally captured the wind roar. After the wind roar was lost, I led the residual army to withdraw, hiding in the snowy mountains, waiting for support. How many people do you have now? There were more than 500 people when they were withdrawn, but later they went away. Now there are only more than 200 people left. The Briard Knight looked sad. Of course, Colin knew that the so-called scattered in the other's mouth was actually running away. However, it is not blame these people to be deserters. After all, it is too far from the north, and the reinforcements seem to be out of reach. In addition, most of the garrison are recruits. It is not unusual to escape under despair. After the troll captured the wind roar, he left. Yes, they just took a long time in the wind roar, and they hurried south. Well, Colin calculated the time and found that he should have passed by with the Trunzer who had just south. This is actually normal. The sky ice is so large. The two troops passing by is the norm. It is the coincidence of a small probability to hit the face. What about the two other flags? I saw the direction of the other two fortresses rising from the 2 days ago, so I should have been captured by the trolls. Colin nodded, and it was no surprise to this. The Golden Lion Legion was here as the garrison was here, apparently did not plan to stick to it. What is the situation in Fenglaobao, do you know? I know the troll did not leave too many troops to stay. I guess there is only about 1 or 2,000, and the defense is extremely relaxed. I have even tried to sneak in the position of less than 100 meters from the fortress at night. Attribute the attention of the defendant. Well, do you have any suggestions on how to attack this wind roar? Hearing this problem, the Brad Knight smiled immediately. Charles also laughed. He looked at the cavaliers of Brad, and then explained, Angeline, in fact, when the DV army first started to mobilize, we realized that the wind roar was bound to lose. Therefore, in order to make a comeback in the future, it is easier to make a lot of money on the wall of the fortress. Oh, Colin's eyes lighted up and asked quickly, What do you do? In the southeast corner of the windrower, a foundation of the city wall was deliberately emptied by us, so now as long as we use Balaam to hit a few times, it will collapse. Okay, Khalil clapped his hand excitedly, and then ordered, the Briard Cavaliers, then please bring someone to prepare for the siege tools early tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, we will launch an attack. Yes. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 195. Chapter 195 Feng Rock Castle, below. Karm is a fourth-order warrior. Like the knights of the human race, the gods such as samurai are generally the patents of noble children in the giants. However, the Kam warrior was still a mercenary. This is unusual. Because ordinary noble children are more willing to fight for honor, not for money. But Kam is an alien, and he prefers money. When he was Baron Kam, in order to obtain more taxes, the tax rate in the general territory increased to the appalling 10-9. It is conceivable that the leaders of Baron Kam quickly ran away because they could not bear such exploration. Then, Kam was identified by the giant emperor as the ability to have no management, and was then deprived of the title and territory. Since then, Baron Kam has become the head of the Karm. The mercenary corps he established was quite famous in the giant demon empire. There were nearly 2,000 members. Most of them were lunatic like Kam, and asked for money and not life. This time, the Kam Ada received another task stationed in Fenglu. Let a mercenary regiment go to the military fortress stationed in the empire border. This task sounds unreliable. Don't look at the large number of mercenaries, there are many masters in it, but you really have to encounter the elite regular army, which is the only one who has been killed. Because of this, many more powerful giant mercenaries have rejected this task one after another, and only Kam, who wants money, picked it down. Moreover, the giant warrior who has never left money has also asked the military representatives who published the task. If the dental mercenary regiment killed the invading enemy during the process of station the windrower, would there be an extra enemy? Remuneration. When he heard such a problem, the face of the military representative was a bit strange, but he promised Karm. Every time he killed an invading enemy, he could use their heads for 10 gold coins. One skull 10 gold coins. Kam instantly became red with excitement when he heard such a return, nodded again, and agreed to the transaction. However, when Kam chewed his palm and led the dental mercenary regiment to the windrower, he suddenly found that there was no enemy's trace at all. In the first few days, the Tuno mercenary corps was also seriously inspected, but after several days of continuous and quiet, the discipline of the mercenary regiment was exposed. Alcoholism, laziness, fighting for female slaves, in short, the entire windrower was burst into smoke by the Ranjai mercenary corps. In the face of this situation, Kam did not control it, because in his opinion, as long as the mercenaries under his men can kill, as for discipline, what is it? The only thing that made the mercenary group was focusing, how did the enemy have not appeared? But soon, the head of the Kams fulfilled the dream. In the early morning of this day, there was a loud noise, and the whole windrower was shaken by a giant hand. When Kam woke up from his sleep, when he was puzzled something happened, he heard his men shouting, enemies, enemies. At this moment, Kam was not surprised, and his eyes emerged with golden brilliance. I saw that he quickly dressed the lock armor, took a machete, and yelled while rushing out, brothers, kill, the opportunity to make a lot of money is coming. Nympho. Outside the windrower, seeing the bright cavaliers really collapsed a city wall with a few beech woods. Colin was overjoyed, and immediately ordered the Log Knight to command the army into the city. Although he knew that the narrow terrain in the fortress was actually not suitable for cavalry, at this time, he couldn't care about these. If you see even attack the windrower, what do you say? Fighting the way back to the house. Log Knight estimates the size of the city wall gap, and then arranged 10 batches of cavalry. Each team was 200, and they rushed into the city in batches. But before the first team of cavalry started to charge, I saw that the defenders in the windroar rushed out of the gap in the collapsed city wall. What's the situation? Log Cavaliers were a little embarrassed. At the foot of the city wall, the Blood Knights saw the Wusha giant soldiers rushing towards them, and quickly led the soldiers of their men to run back. After running out of a distance, the Blood Knight looked back and found out that those giants were chasing behind. What's happening here? The Blood Cavaliers are also a little dumbfounded. Didn't you see that there are cavalry on our side? Do not use the land fortress, run out to play the field with the cavalry. Isn't this a trap? Colin was a little confused when he saw this situation. If it wasn't for the attack, the Cavaliers of the Loggle proposed. Okay, waiting for the trolls to rush out a little, send cavalry to hang forward, but don't rush into the city, first solve the giant demon outside the city. Yes. Nympho. Kill. The giants chased the footsteps of the bright cavaliers and others, roared, and scolded them. They seemed to be angry that these humans ran too fast, and they lost a lot of gold coins. Carm also rushed out of the windroar at this time. The leader of the Tanya mercenary corps was indeed not a fight. Of course, the motion of the mercenary regiment was really different from the regular army. But to be honest, Cam's mind is really not good. Which lord with normal brains will set the tax rate of 10-9? But he finally had normal brains. Master, the head of the regiment, you can't rush anymore, now the enemy is unknown, we rushed out like this. Fart, Cam stared at, scolded, the blood is bloody, if you dare not even charge, then fight. It seems to make some reason. However, the next second, Carm regretted it. Suddenly the earth began to tremble, and 2 cavalry appeared on both sides of the Ranja mercenary corps. They were sticking to the giants' formation, like a pair of big hands, and they all hugged the dragons in their arms. Relief rains are generally shot into the giant demon formation. Strike, counterattack, Carm was furious, shouted, and let the mercenaries fight against the mercenaries. But in the wilderness outside the city, the space of the cavalry movement is too wide. They maintained a state of high-speed pentium, and after shooting a wave of arrows, they immediately opened the distance to avoid the fight against the troll. Then, when the troll's arrow rain was sparse, it would approach again, and re-shot a wave of arrows. Because I was worried that this was a trap, the method of attacking the Black Army was still very conservative. It did not use a positive charge. Instead, it carried out a tactical tactics and patiently cut off the giant's meat little by little. In fact, Colin is still too careful. These giant mercenaries with no reinstalled shields and tight formations are impossible to hold a wave of front waves of the Black Army. Over time, the Log Knight gradually returned. These giants are simply a group of soldiers scattered, and they can't even put the basic military formations. I am afraid it is not a regular army. Colin, who received the return, also shook his head helplessly. Hey, it seems that the defense inside the giant demon empire is really empty. Quickly solve the battle. Yes. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Lugo Busroot. Chapter 196. Chapter 196 Trap. The night was deeper, and the silver moon hung high. The Battle of Fenglaubeo has already ended, and the mercenary corps, which wants money and not life, did not get any money nor life. After quietly converting a few giant warriors into a blood slave, Clinton bellied on the top of the tower of the observation tower. In the whistling cold wind, Charles was holding the fence and looked north. What are you looking at? Colin stepped forward and stood side by side with Charles. Angry Charles bowed slightly towards Colin, and then laughed. I'm watching the city of the giant devil. Call me Colin. Colin waved his hand with a smile. However, can you see the 10th King city here? Haha, of course, I can't see it however, this year, I watched it north almost every day even if I couldn't see the giant devil city, I could feel its existence. Charles clenched her fists, as if in my eyes seemed to be in my eyes, as if in my eyes seemed to be jumping with fire. Then have you been to the King city? I have been. I had sneaked in with the caravan before, but this time, we have to kill. Colin smiled, I hope that the big devil city is as easy to capture as the Windrower. It should not be too difficult after all, the trips are now south. Even if it is the city of the giant, it is estimated that there will be no elite regular army stationed. Colin turned to look at Charles's side face, and suddenly frowned. However, Charles, don't you think we are too smooth this way? Charles was a little stunned. Too smooth, Colin, what are you worried about? You said, will this be a trap of a giant demon? Trap? Charles laughed. Colin, are you a little bit worried? The 100,000 troops that the troll finally made up have been south. The internal emptiness is inevitable. How can it be a trap? Colin reached out and grabbed a handful of snow from the fence, pinched into 2 snowballs, one big and one small. Charles, you said, if the big troops going south of the troll south are a group of black people, and the last batch of elite troops are placed in the city of the trolls, what will happen? No, no, Charles looked at the snowball in the hands of Colin, and said stunned. Do you know? Colin laughed very much. Not long ago, I played a similar trick in Union City. Those stupid East people were played by me. Really? Charles also laughed. I heard that you defeated the Tianmakor in Union City, but I don't know how you did it. It's very simple. I first let the people of the East Tipan mistakenly think that the Black Rider was hidden outside the city, but when the Eastern people sent the elite to search for the Black Army outside the city, I only found a group of semi-elves recruits, and the real Black the cavalry was killed from the Union City. Colin replaced the size of the snow group in his hand. It's so simple. Charles suddenly revealed the color of realization and admired, it is indeed a clever strategy. Colin stared at Charles's eyes, as if to find out something. Charles, do you say that the giant now wants to play similar plays to us? This is impossible, Charles was surprised. If it was, Colin's eyes had already brought a trial. Does anyone tell? Try. Charles's face was completely unlikely. Colin, did you find something? Is our whereabouts really exposed? No, I guess. Has scared me. Charles patted his chest and breathed a sigh of relief. Later, he said in a tone of pushing his heart, Colin, in fact, your worry is not possible. So, when we arrive in the city of the giant devil, let's test the attack first. If the resistance in the city is too tenacious, then we will withdraw the troops later. It makes sense. Colin threw the 2 snowballs out of the ball, and after a while, it came from the ground that he hit the ground twice. He patted the snow on his hand and laughed. I just patrolled in the Windroar Fortress. I have to say that the castle was really strong. After doing hands and feet, the defenders in the city are the stupid mercenaries. If we want to attack here, I am afraid that we will pay a lot of money. Charles had a good chest, and said with proud tone, Colin, don't conceal you. In fact, this is the hands and feet I made by the bright night at the beginning, just to capture the castle more smoothly. Colin ignored Charles's invitation and continued, therefore, such a solid military castle, if we leave after we leave, are resumed by the Trun in Army South. Oh, then do we say that we have no way back and then there is no way, is it? Charles froze, as if it was really scared by the idea of Colin. He returned to God for a while and shook his head and said, Colin, is your concern like this then? How can I suddenly turn back? Colin did not answer this question, but said with a smile, Charles, do you know, I hate 2 people most. Which 2? Charles asked in a mist. The person who deceives me, and the person I can't cheat. Charles was speechless, and for the first time he saw the dual standard guy who had said so for granted. Colin looked at Charles with a smile, and said, if I am a giant, I will deliberately make a big southward look, deceiving Bingian City to dispatch the most elite cavalry to attack the David Castle. But in fact, the Army South is just a group of temporary recruits or simply the Wuxi people consisting of militia and mercenaries. The last elite army of the Giant Empire was arranged in the city of the Giant Devil. When the northern cavalry touched the blood in the Giant Devil city, when he wanted to retreat, he found that the Windrohrberg had been returned to the south. In this way, hey, is it a closing door to hit a dog? Charles blinked, first nodded, and then shook his head and said, Colin, your analysis does make some reason, but when the trolls cannot be sent, even if we are sure that we will sneak attack on the city of the giant, right? Yes, Colin leaned on the fence and stared at Charles's eyes. Unless, from the beginning, this is a bureau, a trap trying to hang the black troops, and you are responsible for introducing the black cavalry to the trap people. What, Collins? Colin, don't forget, what kind of deep hatred between me and the giant devil, every day, I am thinking about capturing the giant devil city and burning it into ruins, how can it help them in turn? Colin watched Charles's performance with a smile, as if returning to the dinner in Bingian City a year ago. At that time, the film Emperor almost faded the nobles of the entire northern border. Do you know when you were exposed? This chapter is finished. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 197. Chapter 197. Lying is an extremely exciting game. Gambling, war, politics, the things that everyone is rushing requires the clever lying skills. A good skillful lying master, without changing the face, light, and raised his hands to pull out a seamless lying in the sky. Want to last again, such scammers are usually respected as masters and even more prominent names. But those techniques are not good, it will be flawed and laugh. In fact, it is also an interesting thing to reveal a lie than lying. Especially when the scammer was still trying to dying. Colin has experienced this happiness at this time. Although he has long been watching the fire, he is still willing to provide Charles with a stage for performance. Continue to install. Colin, what do you mean, what did I expose, do you doubt that I plan to consider you with a giant demon? Charles's expression and tone were just right. In a simple sentence, various complex emotions such as misrepresentation, shock, grievances, and other complex emotions were conveyed. Colin leaned with a smile on the fence, admiring Charles's performance, and said, you said before, this action has actually been the first of the Duke of St. Hilder, and even the Duke promised that as long as I sent troops to attack the Daja King, the Daza King was sent to sneak the Daika King. Will the city marry me? Yet Charles nodded immediately. He Colin sneered, do you know, on the third day of our departure from Bingian City, the Duke of St. Hilda showed publicly he first announced that Marquis, Park of Amon, and others were rebellious, ordered the Golden Lions to attack the Iron Furnace City. Subsequently, the Major Lord sent the messengers to the Winter City. Even the hairy kid of the Longbow family was met, but he did not meet the messenger of Bingian City alone. And this messenger is exactly the messenger who sent to the Duke. He has been waiting for more than 2 months in the Winter City. Charles's face unchanged, and even showed an equally doubtful expression. After thinking for a moment, I explained, Colin, I think my father is not deliberately targeted at Bingian City. Repents on merit, marry Wella to you. Really, Colin nodded in a discharge, it's a bit reasonable. Just when Charles was relieved, he heard Colin and asked, so, how do you explain the time when the troll sends troops? Time to send troops. Charles looked blank and didn't seem to understand the meaning of Colin. Yet if I remember correctly, you arrived at Bingian City on March 26. Seeing Charles nodded, Colin continued with a smile, but, the time for the giant to send troops on March 23, even if you get the news as soon as you get the troops in the giant, How do you be in just 3 days? What about the wind roar to Binjian City? Can you fly? Or did you get the news in advance before the giants' troops were sent? Hearing this, Charles's heart suddenly accelerated, but his face still did not show any strangeness. Collins, did you make a mistake when the TRHZE sent troops? Seeing Charles was still in the stubborn resistance, Colin shook his head with a smile. He saw the drafts of the Trunzer with his own eyes through the eyes of blood slaves, but in just 3 days later, Charles actually appeared in Binjian City, and brought news of the giants to send troops. At that time, he concluded that this Charles had a problem. Did I make a mistake? Then you tell me, when did the giant devil sending troops? Colin looked at Charles with a smile and reminded, however, you'd better think about it, there are still many giant captives in case of your time. I'm not right, it's not easy to handle it. At this point, Charles no longer justified. He lowered his head slowly, letting the shadow shrouded the entire face, and stopped talking. The cold wind screamed, blowing the snowflakes into the observation tower, so that the cold atmosphere here seemed to reduce it a few degrees. Colin looked at Charles, who was in silence, and suddenly sighed, and asked, if I didn't guess it was wrong, the giants should have told you that the truth about the defeat in the northern border at the beginning of last year. Charles did not answer. Just when Colin thought the other party didn't plan to ignore himself, Charles finally said, yes. His voice became cold and frosty, and the cold air emerged was even lower than the temperature on the sky ice field at this time. So, you hate the Duke St. Hilda, and decide to take this opportunity to retaliate against the North. That's right, Charles looked up again, and his eyes flashed with no cover hatred. My good father, treat everyone as his tools in order to achieve the goal. He can hesitate, abandon us? 20,000 northern soldiers, hundreds of northern lords, countless people who died in the northern border of war and famine, in his eyes, were all important. As for me, Adams, Vera, and Uncle Garcia, of course, including you, Colin. In his eyes, it is worthless. Tell me, what qualifications such as such a person have become the Lord of the North, and what qualifications to get your loyalty? Is this the reason for your betrayal? Colin looked at Charles coldly. What is the difference between you now? What is the difference between the Duke of St. Hilda, type the trolls, frame the compatriots, and make the North border getting larger in the North chaos? You are just an ambitionist who only cares about your own interests. Don't put on a face for the heavens. Charles laughed and didn't care about Colin's misration. Instead, he advised, Colin, you regret it now. I can help you say a few words in front of Mr. Suan, presumably he will be willing to accept your loyalty. Colin laughed and ridiculed, do you really think the conspirators of the Saint San family have won? Charles shook his head. Before the dust was settled, no one dared to win, but I didn't want to live under the shadow of the Duke of St. Hilda. How about you, Colin? Since you all know his place, in his place everything you do, why do you still choose to continue to kill him? I don't want to die for him. What is that for? Colin pointed below, and the moonlight was reflected, and a team of Black Army soldiers were patrolling. The Black Army, oh, I understand. Charles was embarrassed. This Black Truer army established by Marquis in Garcia grew up in the bloody battle with the trolls, and the hatred against the troll has been completely integrated into the soul of the army. If Colin chose to reconcile with the trolls, he will completely lose the heart of the Black Army. Even if the Black Ridge is forced to continue fighting for him, he will never maintain the popular fighting power now. What's more, Colin wants to marry Vera. If the Saint Simon family ruled the North, then Vila would also lose its oversupply. Moreover, the important helper of the Saint Simon family, the Uman family, also had hatred with Colin. In short, less than as a last resort, Colin will definitely not be involved in the Saint Sima family. Seeing that I couldn't say Colin, Charles helplessly, okay, then I wish you can survive in the vortex of the North. North China, don't worry there, Let their dog bite the dog for a while. Let me first taste the big meal prepared by the troll for me. Charles stunned, and then he didn't dare to believe. Do you want to continue attacking the Tiantuking city? Colin showed a deep unpredictable smile. Yeah, come here. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 198. Chapter 198 Test. In the whistling north wind, the flying snow dyed the sky and the earth into white. A giant army was moving forward in the snow, and the huge and bloated army array stretched for more than 10 kilometers. From a high altitude, it seemed as if a black python was moving forward. However, around this python, there is still a small ant. These ants are the whistle of the black army. They were inconspicuous compared with the huge trunks, as if the python moved to the body to migrate these ants. However, what was really nervous at this time was a giant python. Prince Akamoto narrowed his eyes and looked at the black troops who were like a bone of the, and his heart was full of anxiety and even fear. He didn't know the appearance of these black troops, but the eyes that Khalil habitually placed behind him, or was the main force of the black cavalry nearby. If the original plan was implemented smoothly, the black cavalry should be on the way to the Tiantuking city, and he can also lead the 100,000 army to the south. Completely cut off the back road of the black army. But now, Prince Akamoto is somewhat unbalanced. Colin see through this trap. On the occasion of his heart, Prince Akamoto repeatedly released a number of whistle rides to try to find out the situation around him. But once these whistle rides is released, it is like mud cattle enter the sea. In this case, Prince Akamoto, who had not had many leadership experience, was a bit stunned. Then he knew how much the real marching war was the difference between the talker on the paper. The young prince of the young giant empire couldn't help raising an idea for a while. How is he going to repeat the mistake of his father? 2 days have passed in the suspicion of Prince Akamoto. In the past 2 days, the black cavalry's whistle surrounded the troops around the giant division. Once the giants tried to attack, they immediately spread away, but after a long time, they appeared again. Essence. At the beginning, the trolls were very nervous, but over time, they seemed to be accustomed to following such a group of flies around. Anyway, these flies don't bite people, follow it. But on the 3rd day, the black cavalry whistle, who has been looming now, suddenly disappeared. This made the trolls uncomfortable for a while. The young Prince Akamoto did not notice the danger for the first time. Fortunately, there are still some giant devil generals in this giant army. After observing the abnormal signs of the black candidate whistle, they immediately sent someone to report to Prince Akamoto to remind the opponent's main force of the black army. I'm afraid it will come soon. Prince Akamoto realized that it was not good, and quickly ordered to gather the army and prepare for the enemy. But this huge and bloated army's reaction was desperate. There is no way. Prince Akamoto was originally a suspect, and most of them were temporary recruits. It is impossible to expect them to respond quickly on the battlefield. However, the Black Army will not give the trolls slowly to respond. When the snowflakes were filled in the distance, the sound of the horseshoe had been faintly heard. The giants felt the tremor of the earth, and then they shouted exhaustedly, letting the soldiers raise the shield, set up a long gun, and protect the periphery of the army. Unfortunately, during the battle, this giant army consisting of a large number of recruits still revealed many fatal weaknesses. Essence. For a while, all kinds of noisy and flustered voices gathered together, so that the trunses could not enter the rhythm of the war at all. In fact, at this time, the most panic was not the trolls, but the coach of this TRHZE, Prince Akamoto. The prince of the troll prince who had been hesitating was very high, thinking that he could also plan on the battlefield, and decided to win thousands of miles. At this time, he panicked. What is calm and command, and the command will be there. At this time, all of them have gone away from Prince Akamoto. The psychological preparations made before the war are even more useful. I heard all kinds of chaotic and noisy sounds in my ears, which made Prince Akamoto helpless. At this time, Prince Akamoto understood that he was not a qualified general at all. The father who had been despised by him was much better than himself. Of course, this is not surprising. Prince Akamoto is really intelligent, and it is also handy to play a conspiracy, but these are not necessary conditions for the battlefield. In short, this sudden encounter, the performance of the giants and the great army was almost impossible to say. Fortunately, the giants still have advantages in their strength. Those recruits looked at their comrades who couldn't see the side, and they couldn't collapse all at once. The black cavalry came quickly, accompanied by a thunderous horseshoe sound. A team of black armored cavalry came across the horse. But in the near future, I turned the direction a little, and scratched not far from the side wings of the giant military army. The buzzing sound of the bowstring immediately sounded, and the arrow rain was like a flying locust, and he rushed to the trolls. Raise the shield, don't move. Archers are prepared, throw spears to prepare. The sound of the other sounded in the giant devil, but quickly drowned in the rumbling horseshoe sound. The arrow fell like the rain, and the sound of the meat continued to sound. There is no lip gun, tongue sword, and no conspiracy tricks. The most direct and rude way for the black riding military, kicked off the prelude to the war. There is almost no interruption of wave-type attacks. Thousands of black cavalry ranked in the number, galloping across the sidewalk of the giant demon army, and the arrows continued to rise into the sky and turned into a rolling spring rain. The trolls also paid a very heavy price for the previous chaos. The shield was not timely, and the shield was not strictly covered. The hedgehog collected by the giant soldiers was like the wheat field blown by the wind, and the blood was planted, and the bloody blood stained the land under his feet instantly. After thousands of black cavalry whistled, the side wing of the trolls made a clear bright red line, where countless corpses were lying down, and the injured soldiers shouted loudly. Shield, trembling on his head. But this is just the beginning. Once the prelude to the war is opened, it will not stop easily. The black cavalry's offensive is still disturbing. After all, Colin is not sure whether the Trunzer who returned south and returning to the south is really suspicious. But after a short and cruel first wave of confrontation, Colin had 80% of them. The last elite army of the giant demon empire was not here. However, he was not anxious. In his opinion, the fate of this bloated and weak giant army is already doomed. The only thing to pay attention to is how to eat the other party with as little casualties as possible. At this time, the Black Army had returned, and once again used the unique way of cavalry to quickly pass the wings of the giant devils, repeat everything before. Such a scene seemed to be the backbone of the Iceland blood battle a year ago. Prince Akamoto watched the black clubs who were unscrupulous to swim and slaughtered, but couldn't find the method of breaking the situation. The screams in his ears endlessly made Prince Akamoto's troubles. To make matters worse, the generals of their men's eyes gradually became full of distrust. As a result, Prince Akamoto, who was so angry, issued a stupid order. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 199. Chapter 199. In fact, this giant army led by Prince Akamoto is not completely elite. If an army that was composed of all recruits went south to attack the north, then after they passed through thousands of miles, the 100,000 troops could still be half left, even if Prince Akamoto was uniform. In order to successfully complete the heavy responsibility of blocking the Black Cavalry Army, Prince Akamoto still has an elite army with a good combat effectiveness of 30,000. Among them, the most powerful combat effectiveness is the 3,000 Wolf Cavalry. This is also the last Wolf Cavalry force of the giant demon empire. If it is not for the cavalry to defend the city, the giant emperor may not be reluctant to give this last family to Prince Akamoto. Faced with the menacing Black Army, at this time, Prince Akamoto ordered a bit of a desperate commander to fight the 3,000 wolf cavalry and cooperated with the infantry attack to attack the Black Army. If the giant army is elite enough, this is actually not a ridiculous military order. However, Prince Akamoto didn't know at all that the gap between the wolf cavalry under his hands and the Black Army, which was really invincible in the real sky. The 3,000 wolf cavalry was originally deployed on the right of the Central Army. In fact, it was also set up to prevent enemy attacks. At this moment, he sent troops from the side wings and did not cause much confusion. But when Colin looked at the wolf cavalry who took the initiative to attack from a distance, his eyes suddenly gone. He had learned from Charles's mouth that the commander of this giant army was Prince Akamoto, but he did not expect that the young man prince was so unable to calm down. No need to wait for the Colin to order to deal with the log cavaliers who have already been familiar with the wolf cavalry, and immediately led the army to retreat, away from the sidelines of the troll. How to eliminate the giants step-riding collaborative operations. The Black Cavaliers generals have also trained countless times with the Marquis of Garcia. The method is simple. If the troops are strong, it is the best choice to break the enemy's cavalry. If the soldiers are insufficient, they temporarily avoid the edge, seduce the enemy cavalry away from the infantry and military arrays, and then attack the situation as the most suitable tactics. Therefore, the Log Knight immediately led his subordinates to the subordinates of the assault operation. The short-ranging syllable in the army number, this is a temporary signal of avoiding retreat. At this time, the wing of the giant army was already full of smoke, and the wolf cavalry suddenly stretched out of the giant devil's array like a thick arm, and the tail of the black club tightly chased. For a moment of staggered, a sullen voice bombed on the battlefield. The tail of the Black Army was caught by the wolf cavalry. In the sound of the war horse, the Black Army soldiers raised their weapons and waved their swords. Immediately, countless figures screamed and were cut down immediately. At this moment, the giant wolf cavalry suffered a wave of extremely violent arrow rain attacks. The giant wolf rolled forward with a long knife and the head of the heads, which was no longer in the arrow rain, and the shield was covered. In the blink of an eye, the sudden and fierce collision ended this time, leaving a group of flesh and blood only in the same place, and then was quickly covered by the swarm of the giant devil infantry. This wolf cavalry is indeed elite. Under this charge, it almost completely crushes the small tail of the Black Army, which has also caused the biggest killing since the beginning of the war. Such a result made the trolls, who had been exhaling excitedly, and the blood and the broken limbs of the sky stimulated their fierceness. As a result, they shouted like a crying wolf, chasing the Black Cavaliers. At this time, Prince Akamoto, who watched the battle at the rear, also waved his fist fiercely, as if all the sullen breath suffered all these days. Unfortunately, when the young prince could not see the situation on the battlefield, regardless of the order of his men to continue to hang with the enemy, he stepped up this army step by step into the abyss of the annihilation. When the Colin saw the wolf cavalry continued to chase, and when the distance from the infantry behind him, he was overjoyed. Originally, he was planning to use the tactics that was constantly struggling, and dragged the Trum to death a little bit, but now, he found a good opportunity for 1,000 years. In fact, the real difference between talented generals and mediocre talents is here. In the face of chaotic and complex, and rapidly changing battlefield situations, Yang will only be confused and even faint, but the real celebrity can grasp the fleeting fighter aircraft, make the most correct decision. This step seems simple, but it requires great guts, courage, and a keen enough battlefield. Colin did not live up to the comments of British Cavaliers and Marquis in Garcia. This is a person born for the battlefield. 1. The long arm sounded immediately, and the Colin issued an offense order. A team of the Black Army changed again, and the arrows in the sky suddenly became dense. People shouting between horses, accompanied by the rolling horseshoe, the situation of the battlefield changed instantly. The demon wolf cavalry chased behind the enemy, but found that the black army had no idea when the sides of them were on both sides. The black army in front was separated to both sides like a tide. When the leader of the wolf road was entangled where to chase, the black tide in front of it was scattered, but once again ushered in a new huge wave. A heavy armored cavalry hit them. The leader of the wolf road immediately rushed, and then realized that he was too deep. But at this time, it would be impossible even if he wanted to stop this wolf cavalry. The wolf cavalry in the assault state cost a lot of effort even if it changes, let alone stop and turn around. Under the effect of inertia, the 3,000 wolf cavalry hit the heavy cavalry of the black army in this way. Boom! For a moment, countless wolves were knocked to the ground, and they were fragmented by trampled. This is the wolf cavalry at the end of the crossbow, and wearing light armor. Without preparation, he hit his head and hit the black rider heavy cavalry who was waiting for. The surrounding black cavalry light cavalry also took the opportunity to go around like a wolf group. At this time, life is fragile like a folding KW, and in a blink of an eye, with the blood sprayed by the sky, it quietly disappears in heaven and earth. The black cavalry used a flexible tactical and powerful combat effectiveness to give the trolls a bloody lesson, let them know, who is the real master on this ice field. The 3,000 wolf cavalry collapsed almost in one face. The wolf riders behind the rear desperately turning the direction and trying to rush back so that the infantry army behind him responded to himself. However, this sudden change of sudden changes is a very difficult action for the ice wolf in the galloping. Under the chaos, the military array of the wolf cavalry was completely split, and it could not be defeated. Prince Akamoto, who witnessed all of this, also experienced the feeling of falling into hell from heaven to hell. Under the anger and fear, he completely lost his weight and ordered the infantry army to go to the wolf cavalry who was scattered. And this order also completely broke the last trace of hope of the giant army. This chapter is finished. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 200. Chapter 200. The veterans who have been on the battlefield know that failure is actually not a slow process, but something that suddenly happens in an instant. It is not necessary to kill all the enemy one by one in order to win. In fact, as long as the tissue of the opponent is destroyed, the defeat will naturally happen. The so-called soldiers are like a mountain, and that's what you say. Experienced generals understand that once the former army was defeated, then sending troops to come forward seemed correct, but it was actually the most stupid decision. Because the defeat of the former army will scatter the formation of the army, it will trigger an avalanche-like defeat. This is why the strategies of fraud and seduce enemies are rare in reality. Unless you really have enough confidence in his command ability and his general, the average coach dare not play such strategies, because if you are not careful, the fraud will become a really defeat. Therefore, when Colin saw the movement of the giant's infantry army, he almost laughed. The one who looks very smart in the Prince Akamoto becomes so stupid when he arrives on the battlefield? In fact, this is not surprising. Zhao Kuo also read the Book of Soldiers at that time. He talked about the law of war. But the real battlefield is a brutal demon mirror. It is a man or a ghost. If you have a talent, try it, you know. At this time, Colin even thought about whether his original plan was too cautious. At this time, the situation of the battlefield was not unexpected by Collins. The wolf cavalry who fled back completely dispersed the formation of the infantry army in the rear. Even if many giants have seen the problem, at this time, it is too late to stop the chaos. This is actually a perfect manifestation of the unable to exhaust the three armies. Seeing this situation, the charge in the front of Collins was about to hold the head of the trial on the top of the head, constantly urging the war horse, and yelled at the same time. Kill, kill. The 800 heavy armored cavalry who followed him also shouted in unison, "Kill, kill, kill." The roar full of murderous roar spread in the army, shocked the wild, went straight to the sky, and even covered the rumbling horseshoe sound. The sturdy and wild Black Riders' heavy cavalry, as if a rapidly moving steel monster, swarmed forward and rushed towards the army of the giant devil's army. At this time, the collapsed wolf cavalry seemed to be the striker of the Black Army at this time, helping them to flush the formation of the giant divine army. In the panic, the front row of the giant devil infantry could not form a solid shield position. The archer behind the rear shot a few arrows, but it could not cause much killing to the heavy cavalry. Before the enemy was killed, the trunzes were already cold, and many giant soldiers fled with the wolf cavalry. Under the spread of panic, the former army was completely gone. Boom! With a loud noise, the heavy cavalry of the Black Army had rushed into the army of the giant devil's army. Under the impact of countless troll soldiers flew out like puppets one by one. The sound of fracture of tooth acid, the bloody blood, made the scene particularly terrifying. The heavy cavalry of the Black Army seemed to be a stunned steel monster, stabbing into the wings of the giant devil's army, and rushed into deeper. All the way, rows of giant soldiers seemed to be trampled across the heavy cavalry that scarecrows were rammed by horizontal. Between the blood fog permeated, they were either folded or folded by the stepping intestines. Where the 800 black cavalry ride re-riding, only the bloody and horrible wolf is left. This scene makes people seem to come to hell. As if the scene a year ago was repeated again, the Black Riding Army used the bloody storm to firmly engrave this nightmare-like memory in the heart of the giant. Colin also proved that the number of people is not the key to the battlefield. 800 iron rides can indeed defeat the 100,000 troops. At this time, the battle has completely lost its suspense. Along the wide gap that the heavy cavalry opened, the light cavalry of the Black Army immediately swarmed up, chasing the troll soldiers who had only escaped. The horseshoe sounds, shouting, screaming, wailing, within 10 kilometers, it was completely shrouded by the sonneto of the war. At this time, no troll generals could stop the defeat. Anyone who blocked the black hysteria Iron Hoof will be overwhelmed by this black torrent. Prince Akamoto looked at all of this, as if it was completely stupid. He couldn't understand why this battle suddenly turned like this. 100,000 troops, 100,000 troops. In front of the Black Army, how could it become so fragile, so it was out of touch? At this time, Prince Akamoto suddenly understood why his father was so unbearable in front of Marquis Garcia. It seems that it really doesn't blame him. Black Cavalry. Could it be destined to be a nightmare that the giant will never get rid of it? For a while, all the ambitions and prosperity and wealth seemed to stay away from Prince Akamoto. In his heart, he suddenly pulled out the long sword in his hand and had to scratch his neck. His Royal Highness, you can't die yet. The guard around him scored the sword in the hands of Prince Akamoto and shouted exhaustedly. Finding the opportunity to revenge is the decision of the hero. Prince Akamoto stunned. The screams in my ears seemed to go away, and the bloody scene in front of my eyes became blurred. For a while, he remembered the scene where he had been humbled to the Duke of St. Hilda in the Winter City of Winter City. Suddenly, Prince Akamoto was relieved. Yes, I have already kneeling once anyway. What is the way to kneel again? As a result, Prince Akamoto threw away the long sword in his hand, ignored his military uniform, took the banner in the hand of the flag, and then looked up his head to look at the direction of the Black Cavalry. Unfortunately, the impassioned coach cannot reverse the situation of the defeat of the army. At this time, the trolls could no longer organize any effective resistance, and the black truer army of the horses had spread to the belly of the giant division army's position. Under despair, most giants defeated their troops and ran back, but how could they escape the pursuit of cavalry? More troll soldiers surrendered, but they seemed to have forgotten how the last time the Black Army treated the Demon Dowager. However, in order to reduce unnecessary resistance, Colin still ordered the acceptance of the troll captives. Cleaning the battlefield and cleaning up the end of the department, Colin led a team of guards towards the direction of the giant demon flag. Before Colin came to follow, Prince Akamoto rolled over the horse, holding a handsome flag for a few steps. Then, I saw that he was suddenly on the ground, and the whole body was lying on the whole body. Great Angeli Viscount, your most loyal slave to ask you hello. This chapter is finished. The Original Vampire. Author, Logo Busroot. Chapter 201. Chapter 201. Night fell. The Black Cavalry built the camp on the spot, a bunch of bonfires burned, and a little bit of cold and bloody smell. The group of Trill-Ebel captives were detained in batches strictly, and the grain and grass seized was also cleaned up. In the temporary command center in the center of the camp, Colin took a grilled lamb leg from the guards and bit his mouth. After finishing, I poured a pot of sheep blood into the stomach, which was so comfortable. The Prince Akamoto, who was hungry with his back, saw the situation, and immediately swallowed. But unfortunately, Colin did not prepare a dinner for Prince Akamoto. I saw that he wiped the corner of his mouth with a napkin and said, "Akamoto, I have always been a friend, but I didn't expect that you actually wanted to count the counting to count the calculation I." Hearing the words like a Colin outfit, Prince Akamoto suddenly burst into tears, as if he was deeply moved, and also shook his head crazy, as if he had suffered great grievances, and the big channel. "Master Viscount, it is my honor to be your friend, I cherish this friendship, but please believe me, I was forced to be helpless this time. Even His Majesty was bewildered by him, I just ordered to act, I can't help but be my own." Colin leaned lazily on the back of the chair, while he asked the performance of the film Emperor in front of his heart, and asked with a smile, "How much do you know about Mr. S' specific plan?" "I know his arrangements on the Demon Empire. As for the north side, I know very little." "Then you know?" Yes, Prince Akamoto nodded again, and then began to tell. Sure enough, it was almost the same as the speculation of Colin. This time, the giant demon empire made a lot of money. There was a total of 80,000 war soldiers. But they were not ready to invest in the vortex of the north, because in case they messed up, the entire giant empire may have a danger of falling apart. And to be honest, the giant demon empire does not afford this huge expedition. Therefore, Mr. Yan asked them to target Colin, or to say more accurately, it was the black troops in the hands of Colin. This army can be said to be the nightmare of the giant demon empire, and every giant demon dreams that the black lion flag will disappear in the world forever. As a result, the two sides took a shot, and the giant devil empire sent 30,000 regular army, coupled with the temporary 70,000 recruits, formed a mighty 100,000 expeditionary army to make the illusion that he went south to invade the north. Then Mr. G rejected Charles St. Hilda and asked him to go to Binjian City to report a letter, persuading the Colin to take advantage of the emptiness of the DV Empire to sneak attack on the giant devil city. But in fact, in the city of the troll, there were also 50,000 elite army hidden, waiting for the Colin to kill in unswervingly and hit a blood flow. At the same time, the army in the north of the south will also return to halfway, control the 3 military castles along the snow mountains, and completely cut off the back road of the Black Army. In this way, the terrible cavalry that can control the situation in the north and the giant demon empire can be strangled in the territory of the giant demon empire. After listening to Prince Akamoto, Colin looked indifferent and could not see his anger. After a while, I asked again and asked, "How much do you know about Mr. Sun's plan in the north?" "I only know that Mr. Yan has rejected the Dawson family and the Uman family. They will be the main force against the Golden Lion Legion." "Is it just for the Golden Lion Legion?" Prince Akamoto stunned, and said, "Adults, I am forgive me, the military forces that the St. Hilda family can rely on in the north are currently left not big, not to mention, these people are still some walls, and they may not be desperate for the San Hilder family. Of course, if the Black Army in your hands is still in the north, it will definitely be a force that cannot be ignored. Therefore, Mr. Yan will only formulate this plan. Colin shook his head. No, I am talking about the St. Lorenzo family. The St. Simon family wants to sweep the northern border. The royal family, Prince Akamoto frowned. After thinking for a moment, he used uncertainty. Master Viscount, Mr. Kun's plan I knew did not make any arrangement against the St. Lorenzo family. As if he was determined that the St. Lorenzo family would ignore the chaos of the north. Oh, Colin also frowned and puzzled, but you should know the grievances between the St. Lorenzo family and the San Sima family. Yes, I know at the time, the San Sima family had a judge, and I personally cut off the head of the San Loren family's Black Emperor. Now that you know this, you should also understand that although the St. Hilda family who had destroyed the San Simon family was at the beginning, the real monitor behind the scenes was probably the St. Lorenzo family. Therefore, how could Mr. Yan take the northern border this time? Master Viscount, I really don't know this, Prince Akamoto said with a stern face. Mr. is just using it for us, and he has never been to the point of pushing your heart. Colin rubbed his eyebrows and fell into thought. Seeing this, Prince Akamoto was afraid that the other party thought he had concealed. After thinking about it for a moment, he quickly added, Master Viscount, I suddenly think of one thing, maybe it is helpful to you. Explain. Mr. is actually a powerful mage, and he has a close relationship with the senior figures of the Jeveli Parliament. I guess that this time in the northern border is probably mixed with the mage's power, the Lunzo family's method. Master, Khalil's brows frowned. He didn't think the mages of Jeveli had the ability to stop the St. Lorenzo family from getting involved in the northern border. Although the mage's forbidden mantra is extremely terrible, the price paid is also terrible. Colin did not believe those high-level mages were willing to help the St. Simon family to win the price of life in the north. What's more, this thing is like a nuclear weapon, but nuclear weapons have a deterrent only when they are not attractive. Once it is sent out, it is not threatened, because the next is the endless situation. Therefore, if the mage wants to interfere with the situation in the northern border, he can only rely on conventional means. But how can Jeveli get the decision of the St. Lorenzo family by the conventional means? Colin shook his head and decided not to think about it for the time being. After all, he obtained too little information now and could not make accurate judgments. Immediately, he looked at Prince Akamoto, showing a deep smile, and said faintly, Akamoto, I will be a guest of the giant devil city, so you need to help me send a post to your giant demon emperor. Prince Akamoto watched Colin for a long time, doubting whether he was wrong just now. He has already told the other party that the giant devil city is a trap, with a 50,000 elite army hidden in it. Why do Colin want to be a guest? But looking at Khalil's serious expression, Prince Akamoto knew that he had no hearing. He didn't dare to ask more, he could only nod. Yes, willing to serve you. This chapter is finished.